We start now. Welcome to the meeting. First of all, the reminder that we give every meeting for officers and external reps to switch off their microphones and cameras until asked to present, and to switch them back off once they've made the presentation or spoken. Members of the committee should keep their cameras on throughout the meeting. We're all aware of that, aren't we? So first of all then, apologies for absence. No apologies?
We've had apologies from David Isaac and Kath Phelan.
Oh yeah, David said he may be here, he may not. I mean, he plays by, his job, and we know how busy he is. Declaration of interest?
Chair, I haven't got a declaration of interest but I've got a declaration of some sort. I want to hijack your meeting for a second and give thanks to you personally, if that's okay, and if you will indulge me, Chair, just in case I miss the end of the meeting. I really think it's important for me to say a couple of words, if that's okay with you.
Oh, thank you.
Right, everybody, if you're not aware, this will be, I believe, Councillor Harvey Jones's last scrutiny meeting, last learning and Laceskip scrutiny meeting as chair and as a councillor. And I just really thought it was an opportune, and Sue has reminded me, but it's such an opportune moment really to recognise what Harvey has done for this local authority over the years, but especially as a member of this scrutiny, and prior to that, Harvey as a cabinet member for education as well. And personally really hard from me because, we may sit on other sides, but we have worked together to make sure that the education of our children in Merthyr Tydfil is of paramount importance. And I personally want to thank you for all of your support you gave me when I was chair of scrutiny and you were cabinet member. And hopefully we've continued to do that and you feel the same way as those roles reversed in the last term. Harvey, I can't count, I'm going to fingers to count how many years you've been a local councillor and all that you've done in the local authority, in your years as leader as well. But I certainly feel we must recognise your length of service, your commitment to this council and your commitment to the children of Merthyr Tydfil. Harvey, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service, and I'm sure that is echoed by everybody in this scrutiny this evening. Thank you, Councillor Jones, and all the very best for the future now in your retirement. I know you've come out of it before, but I'm sure you're retiring this time. But Harvey, I just want to thank you.
Yeah.
Here.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Those kind words.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you. So, with those kind words, we'll then move on to item 3, which is the Estin self-evaluation reporting framework. And I'll hand over to Sue. I don't know whether Sue or Andrea are going to go through this report, but if I hand over to Sue first, she can direct operations from there.
Until about an hour and a half ago, we weren't sure ourselves, actually, Councillor Jones, because I'd forgotten that we'd put this one up, and it was Andrea had written it for the inspection. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Andrea to take you through it, but before I do, the actual inspection report will be published tomorrow morning. So it will be sent around to members, to councillors. The link to the inspection report will be sent around first thing in the morning. So thank you to everybody who took part in the interviews and actually took part in that process. So a lot of this was shared with the inspection team when they came around. So part of the reflection from their evaluation of this is in the report as well. So I'm going to hand you over to Andrea now.
Thank you.
Hey, afternoon, everybody. Okay, some of the detail of this. Are you okay there? Yeah, everyone hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Some of the detail of this you'll probably already know. This part of the self-evaluation report is usually steeped in data. But as you know, the elements around data have been suspended in the last few years. And that's because obviously COVID in the last 2 years, and then the changes to the measures back in 2019 and the reported measures for primary schools and secondary schools. So a comparative report, which is usual for the key question 1, is not possible. And it actually outlines that in our report from Estin as well, because the differences, in particular over the last 2 years, there's been a mixed approach, I suppose, to the key stage 4 measures. Prior to the pandemic, as you know, key stage 4 was unsatisfactory. So key stage 4 being year 11 outcomes. So those were unsatisfactory, and it's that area that obviously a lot of work is being done, a lot of targeted work with support from Central South in terms of school improvement. In terms of the last 2 years, we are able to look at what the schools have done. However, we can't make any comparisons. So we are seeing some improvements in the different areas if we take sort of the older measures, with one of the schools sort of still outperforming others, and then other areas having targeted support. Hopefully that will change now going forward. But even for this year, there's a different approach again in terms of the examination. So it'll be but mainly examinations unless anything changes between now and the summer. So that is another move from last summer where we had the sort of centre assessed grades. However, we are able to look at sort of some of the other areas. In terms of Fly and Start provision, that is showing some beneficial and good support and progress in speech and language, although we have seen some great difficulties with regards to speech and language throughout the pandemic, and that's impacted quite significantly. However, the Fly and Start team have tried to adapt what they've done during the pandemic and still deliver aspects of the screening toolkit. That's now going into foundation phase and key stage 2, and will be sort of the means by which to improve the outcomes in terms of speech and language going forward, which is complemented then at key stage 3 into the secondary school by work that's being done in terms of vocabulary as well, and work around writing as such. Now, when we speak to the schools, they're actually able to give us good detail about the progress at school level, which is very different to the progress at local authority level. So they're able to look at where their children are, and many of them have redone their baselines coming back to school, because obviously the regression in most areas due to the pandemic as such, and they, as a result of that, they've changed the way that they've set their targets. They've changed the way that they put the intervention into place as well. What we have seen in terms of secondary school is the English language gap is narrowing. And at the moment is narrowed from 12 percentage points to 10.4. And also the English literature element has gone from 26 percentage points to 18. However, those are still below the Welsh averages, so that's where we need to work on as well. The numeracy point score has increased at a greater rate, so there is more successes there, and that's now above the 2019 averages, so some good work that has been done with that. What we are seeing, however, is that none of the pupils are leaving without qualifications at level 1. And in 3 of the schools, it was 100% achievement there. So it's actually widening to the wider range of pupils and not just based around that sort of A to C angle as well, which is, you know, very important for the different sort of groups of learners. The gap for FSM, non-FSM, which is a sort of crude measure, if you like, in terms of poverty, has actually fluctuated. And what we're seeing is that the EFSM boys are achieving less well than girls. And the boys issue is something that's sort of across the board, particularly linked into literacy. And you probably find that's probably no different to other areas. So one of our targets for improvement is, in fact, the literacy and the level of boys' attainment as well across Merthyr. That's within the sort of elements of the RAS strategy as well. An area of success is linked into the AA star. We are seeing improvements in that area, so at the top end, and that has been a focus of work with regional consortia and within Merthyr. So we are seeing some fruits there as well. In terms of additional learning needs, they are making progress from their starting point. So it's a different kind of way to look at their progress rather than whether they meet a certain measure. However, when we look at their individual development plans, they are working well against those targets set within those. Despite the kind of improvements, there are still issues for us here in Merthyr, as the key indicators are still below the 2019 Welsh averages. So that's something that we're obviously still focused upon and is very prominent within the RAS and obviously as part of the corporate strategy as well. Attendance also remains an area that we need to continue to work on, although we are seeing sort of some improvement, if you like, at the beginning of this term compared to last term with the pandemic as well. Exclusion data remains low. There have been increases a little at primary school over the time, but only 6 permanent exclusions since September. So again, that's areas where we're looking at in terms of how they compare to other schools, but also the type of tuition that we can find for those as well. Well-being, you've already scrutinised, so we won't go into the detail around that. Now, obviously, we would like to be good. And the elements linked into the improvement is within the RAS, but also within our own action plans as such. So we'll continue to work at the top end, but also EFSM boys across Key Stage 3 and 4, and literacy for all learners, and particularly those leaving primary school as well. So that's a key focus for us, and actually had some discussions with CSE against that today as well. Now, as you're aware, with the changes to the measures and with the new curriculum, this issue about sort of what progress looks like, what data is available, is something that we're also working on with head teachers to gather our own sort of expectations of Merthyr as well. So I've set up a series of different sessions to work with head teachers on that. So we should have our own kind of expectation framework ongoing by the end of the year. And it's important within that we don't just include the narrow data measures, that we actually widen out to ensure that we include things like well-being as well.
Is Andrea frozen for everybody else? Yeah. Okay, so she's looking at that. She was looking at the evaluation framework then. If you remember, Betson and myself came last year to actually discuss about that evaluation framework. So Andrea's now taken on board that and is looking at how we can sort of develop that with the head teachers and bring it back to you the next, early in the next administration, to see how we can actually share with you progress measures of the schools, because as members, that's what you want to know. That's what I want to know as Director of Education. How well are our schools doing? How well are the children doing? And so that's what Andrea was discussing. She's just come back in now. So
sorry. Fun.
Okay. So I
That net
explained
was
where you were
quality.
with the evaluations, and yeah, so I think over to questions, Andrea?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, apologies. There any questions?
I have a
Are there
question.
any questions? Any questions for Andrea?
I got a question, Chair.
Yep. Carry on, Sherelle.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It's really encouraging to hear that we've got positive progress being made. Against the self-evaluation last year, it was tough, you know, to see that the status that we set in terms of the outcome for Merthyr. It is frustrating, and like Sue said, we do keep on about, well, how can we see what progress looks like? So what for these children? And it's important that we can get to a position where we're confident in both quantitative and qualitative data that's coming through to ensure we've got confidence that the education service is working for our children and young people of the borough. So I'm sure that'll be well received when that's ready to be distributed for the council. My question really was around the Flying Start aspect of the report, and it's really positive to see that Flying Start can make a demonstrable improvement to the speech, language and communication strand of children's learning across Merthyr Tydfil. As you might be aware, the Welsh Government has recently announced that they are investing more in Flying Start programmes across Wales, and the rollout of the Flying Start programme will commence as early as September 2022. So the idea is within the next 3 years, all 2 to 3 year olds across the local authorities will have access to fully funded childcare provision through Flying Start services, which is absolute music to my ears, because I am a very strong advocate of early intervention and prevention. It is up to the local authorities to look at how that expansion works and where it will be best delivered. And my plea for consideration is the Bedlinog ward within Merthyr Tydfil, because Bedlinog is one of the most rural wards within the county borough. And it is at a disadvantage at the moment, with only half of the ward, i.e. Trelewis, under the Flying Start programme. But the benefits that it can bring to the local authority are much wider as well, because we've been working significantly hard with the officers to secure 30-hour childcare capital funding for Bedlinog Primary School. That works is currently being undertaken now, with the hope that we set up a brand new preschool provision from September 2022. With the additionality Flying Start could provide to the families in the area, it would be phenomenal. So it would not only help the local economy and boost the preschool and aid sustainability, but it would also really support the high level of children going into Bedlinog Community Primary School with low levels of speech, language and communication skills currently, because there is no preschool provision locally accessible. So that's my little plea really, and just to say keep up the good work, and we hope to see the improvements that are desperately required around our key stage for year 11 pupils moving forward. Thank you.
Can I come in there, Sherelle, just for you? As you know, obviously once the announcement was made, we've already started looking at, started working on, that rollout, and we are planning a phased expansion from September 2022. Neither Chris nor Sarah are here this evening. But Flying Start are currently analysing the data in relation to the lower super output areas based on the latest data that we've had, that those that are currently not part of the Flying Start programme. We'll then look at overlay it with the availability of childcare places in each area to identify, as I'm sure you were doing yourself, identify potential expansion points so we can have some quick wins, and then areas of concern that will need significant investment to create new childcare places to accommodate that commitment. All the proposed expansion models and a clear rationale will be shared with the Tackling Poverty subgroup and Cabinet with a full expansion report, as we also recognise this would be an area of much debate. Now, what I will say, as you are also all aware, members are also all aware, that Chris will be moving over to social services on his return. His areas are moving across to social services, but it's a conversation that we've already had because it impacts so much on education that at some point during the year we need to have a joint scrutiny meeting with members from social services and from the learning and LGES to actually discuss. If you think about the last couple of years, when we've discussed early years, when we've discussed youth provision, when we've discussed all that and its impact on the progress of children and young people. So there is a conversation to have, perhaps Taryn and myself have already had it, to have 2 joint scrutinies a year where we would actually look at those overlapping areas from social services and learning and education. So in which case we would discuss all these sort of things there, Sherelle.
Yeah, that sounds good. So fab, thank you.
Thank you, Sue, for that. Any other questions from members?
Yes, please, Chair.
Jeff?
Jeff's got his hand up.
Thank you, Chair.
Jeff?
I'm a bit of a sceptic, but before I start that, I want to say that I agree 100% with Sherelle, and I don't often say that, as she knows, but, you know, she's 100% correct when it comes to Bedington School and its Flying Start facilities. And I think a lot needs to be said. She needs to be praised for trying to take this forward and actually working hard in this respect. So thank you, Sherelle, for that. I'm really pleased that is becoming to be an issue, and it's going to come into reality at some point soon. So that's good. I'm going to be a little bit more sceptical now, if I can. And Sue knows I'm often sceptical, and please forgive that. But I just need to know. And you may well have discussed it before, guys, and if you have, just shut me up and tell me to go away. At point 5.1, at KQ1, the outcomes were unsatisfactory last time, and we all know that. So what evidence do you have that significant development has happened? And I appreciate it's difficult to determine that, but any evidence you've got would be helpful. We've had some time now to make improvements, and in comparison to other education areas. So where are we developing in that? Andrew, you said FSM is a crude measure, and I agree. I think I understand where you're going with it, but Welsh Government uses that to fund some formulas, don't they? I'm fairly certain they do. And if that's a crude measure, what other measures can we put in place to get the results that you and Sue want? And I accept at 0.60 that we want to be good. Everybody accepts that, yeah. But where are we in actuality?
In actuality, I think the simple one is we are confident that our schools are doing as well as they could be expected after the pandemic, but at the moment we don't have robust data, and I think that was accepted by Eston. We've got data. You know, we are very lucky that the schools are willing to share a lot of information with us, although many authorities don't. So we have had quite a bit of information from the schools, which does show that their results for the last 2 years haven't been over generous. They have been where they should be, and they have been where their targets are set. So we are confident that what we're saying is robust. We can't compare, I'll get Andrea come in for a minute. We can't compare ourselves with other local authorities because there isn't any other local authority that we can actually, they're not providing that information. The only information we can actually provide evidence against is the Welsh average. So those, Harvey and Lee, a number of people have sat in this scrutiny for a long time. When I first came in, I think our ambition was to be in the top 10. Then it was to have something closer to the modelled outcomes, and now it's becoming closer to the Welsh average because the goalposts keep changing, Jeff. And it's trying to make sure that we can, this is why we need this evaluation framework, so we can demonstrate to members, to to scrutiny, that our schools are making the right progress. It is a very difficult situation at the moment. But over to Andrea to answer the rest of the question.
I'm not quite sure what you said there because I was kicked out again. But in terms of where the evidence that we've got is that the schools, the secondary schools, have provided us with the information from 2020 and 2021, and much of that is set against their targets as well. And we also use something called ALPS, which is a sort of value-added measure where we utilise the national tests and put a kind of almost like a kind of prediction element in as well. So we also have that as evidence of where the schools are. Now, I can kind of say this is where the Welsh averages are, this is where Merthyr is, but you're not necessarily measuring it on fully the same thing. Because the centre assessed grades, obviously there's a process to them, but it's not a standardised exam as such. And what you see is a very sharp increase both across Wales and in Merthyr in that first year. And then in Merthyr, we see a much more levelling off.
She's frozen again, isn't she? Yeah. So we saw that levelling off of sort of standards last year, but we've still gone back, and as Lisa will know, we actually have corporate panel meetings with you'd know, Jeff, as well, with all our secondary schools, and that's where we challenge our secondary schools on the data. And a conversation with the secondary schools to say, right, what targets are you set? Are those high enough? And then you have that argument that, well, if we set the targets too high and we don't reach them, you challenge us and say, why haven't you reached them? And if we set them where we think they're going to be, you're saying they're not aspirational, so we can't win either way. And I say, no, you can't. Because actually we do want to push them, and we do want to push as far as we can. What we're also looking at, and Harvey will be, we're not going to let go of attendance just because Harvey isn't going to be sitting on scrutiny anymore. We're still sort of looking at attendance, because if the children aren't in school, they can't attain, can they? So we're looking at attendance data. We're looking at exclusion data, because again, if the children aren't behaving, they're not in school. So we've got a variety of data that we will be looking at in a wider sense to be able to give a holistic picture of the school. You mentioned EFSM. Yes, the schools, traditionally, Merthyr has performed well for EFSM pupils. That's not to say, we perform as well as other authorities across Wales. It's our children that are not eligible for free school meals don't do as well as they should. So we will continue to look at that EFSM and continue to push that agenda. What you've got to remember in primary schools, that as of September, all foundation phase children will be having free school meals, and from the following September, all Key Stage 2 will be having free school meals. So there's lots of conversations going on with Welsh Government as to how we can actually fund schools and look at things in a different way. It's quite a difficult time to be in education and actually presenting evidence, because the goalposts seem to change all the time. But I think our ALPS data, which Andrea referred to, we will bring to scrutiny if you want to. We'd need to do it in a workshop, and it would need to be quite confidential. We could look at that. Perhaps we can take it into a room rather than over Teams and actually have a look at it and have some dialogue over it, and we can explain that, because I think that's really helped us get under the skin of things, under the teeth of things.
And what ALP shows us is sort of improvements. It shows us entry data, for example, so where schools have perhaps entered some students in year 10 as well as year 11, and what sort of differences that kind of makes as well. And it does give a sort of school to school breakdown, but like Sue said, that's more difficult then to kind of deal with. The other type of data that we have is linked to well-being. So some schools utilise the PERMA tool. So again, that gives us an understanding of where students' social emotional needs are, and then the schools are using that data in order to put different interventions in. So there's actually a wide range, as well as the trust that we have in school self-evaluation and what they're reporting. They kind of track various things to the nth degree, which doesn't necessarily come up to a local authority level. But obviously, they're the ones at the front line and reporting that back to their improvement partners, and then having that sort of verified. So there's sort of the qualitative data that then comes from looking at things like book scrutinies, from their learning walks, from discussions with children. So that's also data that we need to build into this evaluation framework, so that isn't just around accrued measures of percentages and the narrow measures that there was before. That's the whole point of the changes within assessment in Curriculum for Wales as well, is to widen our view of what actually progress is and what data is as well. So we're looking at those sorts of angles in terms of how we know that improvements are being made as well. Now, I think that was one of the questions, Jeff.
Yeah.
Remind me of the others. Have we answered all the others?
It's done most of it. Sue's answered most of it, and I'm really grateful for your time, guys. I take the point. My only point here is that our parents are reasonably simple souls. I don't mean that in a derogatory remark, but what I mean to say is they look at school X has got X% and school Y has got X%, and why hasn't my child got that X%? That's what they were interested in. And we know that, and everybody around this table knows that. But at the end of the day, we do have to present at some point, you know, some relevant data that they can look at to know where they are, even if it's unofficial. And I take the point, it's very difficult to produce, so I really do. But you as chief guy would always say to the schools, look, you know, it's difficult to produce, but if you don't challenge it, I don't know it. And you're right. And that's all I'm doing here, playing reverse roles and challenging you. And I just need to know that our parents are getting the very best for their kids. I'm sure they are, but prove it. That's all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee Davis.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Quick question, following on from Cheryl and Jeff have said around flying start. Is it only the WIMD, and is it with the WIMD from 2009? I don't think there's any.
No, it's the latest data. There was WIMD data from 2019.
Yeah, 19. Yeah.
Yes, but it's looking at all the information that we have around the current situation in our ward. So there's lots of information that the Flying Start team are actually pulling together to consider how we can actually, you know, we need some quick wins, but then how we can actually get that sort of structured approach to get it out there as quickly and efficiently as possible without sort of staggered starts.
I'm not expecting you to tell me what the rank. Do we have a table of where we rank non-flying start areas at the moment where you would want? Sorry.
That's what they're working on at the moment, Lee. You know, we've got some that we've got some sort of areas where there is one part of the road that's part of Flying Start and the next part of the road isn't. Those are some quick wins, aren't they? Because you actually bring the whole of that road into it. So that's what we're looking at the moment. It only came out, Cheryl, was it a couple of weeks ago? A few weeks ago it came out. So it's gone to Cabinet. Chris took a brief paper to Cabinet to say this is what we're actually looking at. We've got a poverty meeting on the 5th of April. Where we start looking at it. So it's definitely been worked into to make sure that we've got those quick wins in September and then that structured approach that will move forward. So if I suggest that, I don't know which group it'll come to, but we bring something to both scrutinies as soon, early in the administration to give a plan of where we are with that Flying Start rollout.
Yeah, I fully support what Jeff and Cheryl said in supporting Flying Start. When Cheryl was in her former role in Communities First, we worked closely together on projects and seeing community first and not flying start in areas like that is really disappointing. Definitely should be in that area. The other question I've got is around the Estin report. I know you can't go into it fully, but you know, on what you've viewed at the moment, do you feel that we're moving in the right direction?
Yes.
Yeah, simple answer, is it? Yes.
Yes.
Looking forward to reading it tomorrow then.
Is that on a sunbed, Lee?
No,
Upside down on a roller coaster.
my sunbeds are over now. I'm home yesterday and I go back to Boston Wednesday, so there's no sunbed there. There's thermals there, I think, at the moment. So, yeah. All right. Thank you for that.
Councillor Ernie Goldsworthy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick one, really. Between the youth service and maybe the Glynmeal Centre of the Gypsy Traveller area. Now, I believe somewhere that there is some money for the Glynmeal Centre. I don't know if it is or not, but if it is, would it be an idea if some of the youth service could be diverted there to help these vulnerable people? Thank you very much.
Ooh, that's interesting. I know we were our EAL and Gypsy Traveller teacher and support staff. They do go to the Glynmeal Centre, and they certainly worked very hard with our Gypsy Travellers during the pandemic, and actually went up there quite a lot to ensure that they were engaging with learning and carried on taking books and taking information up there. Sam, Sam is on the call. I can be really cheeky and ask Sam, is there any youth provision up there?
No, not currently. Not a discrete provision, youth provision up in the Glynmeal estate. No, there isn't.
I think it's something possible, Councillor Goldsworthy, we could discuss with Lily and actually see, because that's where that would possibly come, to see if Lily Bramwell could actually do some support there. Lisa, Councillor Mitten, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, just to say, we're actually supporting with some investment into the site and some of the outer buildings, you know, so we can sort of try and knit all this together really and see if there is some additional work that could be done, you know, as far as provision is concerned up there. So yeah, happy to look into that as well and support as much as I can.
Although, can I just add, and it's kind of in relation to the paper that I'm going to be presenting, you know, if any young people from the Gypsy Traveller community are identified in need of additional support through some of our targeted programmes in the youth service, you know, they would be able to access that. But Councillor Goldsworthy, if you're referring to like an open access youth club type provision, then there isn't currently anything up there. But I know that, for example, the street-based team have been up there previously to do group activities, but at the moment, no, there isn't anything up there.
Okay. Any other members wishing to ask a question? No? If not, Andrea and Sue, my grateful thanks to you for going through that report. I mean, it's a sort of report that we could spend a whole scrutiny committee talking about. But obviously, we've got other items on the agenda. But once again, thank you to Sue and Andrea for that. On to the next item, Capital One Development. And I believe that Anthony Lewis is going to go through this report, because as I understand it, Emma Strand, the data officer, is on holidays today. So Anthony, if what I said is correct, welcome to the meeting, and over to you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Harvey. Thank you, Chair. Yes, Emma Strand's on annual leave today. So I'll just be providing some key messages from the report. It's an updated position with regards to our Capital One management information system. We do now have a technically reliable Capita One system, and it's been hosted as part of the Capita Cloud and has been since that was implemented in January 2020. So that's been a big improvement on the previous arrangements we had with RCT, when that was hosted by them as part of the original regional development grant, European funding back in 2013. That's been a significant improvement in the technical hosting. We've now also got a Capita One team with 2 new members of staff that have been put into post alongside Emma, and they've been in post since August 21 and November 21. That's allowed us then to have a development plan for the Capita One system. So we've got that in place now for the current academic year 21-22. That's been agreed with service managers and heads of service, and that will then be continuing and updated for the next academic year as we progress through this one. We've got a Capita One review being undertaken by the Capita transformation team at the moment, and that's about helping us to optimise our current use of the Capita system. So that's ongoing currently. Another key message really from the report is that there are opportunities for ongoing investment in the training and development of officers, capacity building within the team, as well as the development of the system. And that comes about through the potential to earmark monies arising from underspends in year through use of community wellbeing grants against our core Capita resources. And there's an opportunity there for us to be able to then use that money to further develop and invest in our Capita One system. We've identified within the report, I think it's in section 5.13, that over the last 4 years, we've spent £63,000 on additional development of the Capita One system through this means, but also there's £90,000 over that period that's been realised as a saving. So we've had discussions with Steve Jones, the Chief Financial Officer, regarding that, and there'll be a request going to Budget Board at the end of the month in order for us to be able to earmark the current year's underspend, which is around £20,000, to support us to further develop the system then into next year. And that's an opportunity for us to be able to continue the investment in our capacity building and capability within the system. So they are just some quick key messages, Chair, in terms of the report, and it's then just to take any questions and comments from members, if that's okay.
Thank you for that, Anthony. Any questions from members or officers? No? You've got an easy afternoon there, Anthony.
Sorry, Chair, I
think
can't
Sherelle might
find
want to
my
come in.
hand.
Oh, Sherelle is there. Sherelle.
Thank you. Yeah, just a quick one, really. One, I absolutely fully support it, Anthony. Unless we've got a strong and effective management information system to extract all the data that we require in as councillors and for officers, then we fall short straight away. So I certainly think it is a priority that's needed to be actioned. Within the report, though, you mentioned that there was some staff that moved over to support the development of the Capita system, and then COVID struck, and then that ended. So is there scope for those people to be re-established to support the development, or is that something that's you're not going to take on now?
Thank you, Cheryl. It was always something that we would explore it in terms of how would we make this sustainable.
Yeah.
We knew we needed to have additional staff and resources, and we needed to ensure that the staff resource that we have then centrally works across the core learning services as well as community wellbeing. So whilst we were waiting to get to that point, we obviously utilised this common opportunity to develop and upskill those existing staff, and we were looking as to how that may be sustainable. And we've had discussions then with Chris regarding whether or not some of the community wellbeing, so that on an ongoing basis, one full-time equivalent staff member could be appointed through the community wellbeing team, and that would give us additional capacity again. It's been difficult really to take that element forward because the community wellbeing grants have got existing projects that they're supporting, and the way that it's worked is we've only been able to utilise underspends against that grant as they arise during the year, rather than through in a planned change of use. So as things stand, the 2 new members of staff will provide that development capacity across the whole of learning and community wellbeing. And even though that service area is now going into social services, we'll continue with that development commitment. It does mean that those members of staff have now been upskilled within community wellbeing, and they're able to take forward additional work within their own areas for Capita 1 and work with the central team. So there's ongoing benefits to that, but it was always intended to be I suppose, a temporary measure to gain development capacity within that team. And the sustainable element required that change of grant. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to achieve that.
Okay. I just think, when you're talking about the sustainability, if you're putting all your eggs into 2 baskets, i.e. 2 posts, you'd always manage in a risk, so the more people that you can get on to support the development across teams, I think is one of the a good approach to have, and to get teams to invest in upfront as well, and not do it just retrospectively to cover an underspend. Do you see what I mean? Because we've got to get the system right, haven't we? And the local authority has got to see the investment that's needed in order to make sure that it's functional and producing the right data that we are requiring going forward. Okay.
No, I think you're right, Trell, and I think on that as well, what the underspends are doing is allowing us an opportunity to truly understand what the resource commitment is for Capita 1 on an ongoing basis. And so once we've been able to do that for a couple of years, then we may be able to determine exactly that more resources may be required potentially. So yeah, and I think we have to keep those conversations ongoing as well with community wellbeing, so that when the projects are changing, I'm not sure exactly what the timescale is for that, but that is something we've discussed with Chris, that when the projects are changing through those grants and there's an opportunity then to reconsider their purpose, there may be an opportunity there to consider a designated officer for community wellbeing as part of the team, and that would expand the capacity then. So yeah.
Definitely. Okay, fab. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Well, Anthony, thank you very much for that. Nice to see you again, committee.
Yeah, nice to see you as well. All the best, Harvey. Take care.
Thank you very much. On to item 5, implications for young people in schools due to the end of European funding. I know that Samantha is with us. I'm not sure whether Chris is with us. I haven't seen his face.
No, he's
Samantha,
not.
is he with us? No?
Yeah.
If not, I can hand straight over to you then. Samantha?
Yeah.
You can take us through what is a very important topic at this point in time.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chris is on leave at the moment, so that's why I'm here today to take you through this paper. This paper is actually a follow-on from one that the Economic Regeneration Department submitted to the Regeneration and Public Protection Scrutiny Committee on the 25th of January. But that paper was in relation to European funding as a whole for the local authority. So Sue, Chris and myself thought that it would be worth putting in a separate paper to yourselves in this particular scrutiny committee, just to outline what European funding currently does for us and the risks associated with that funding ending. In the report, what we've tried to do is to give you a flavour of what activities it funds, what strategies all of that work contributes to, and to start thinking about what might replace it. We've secured funding for the Inspire projects and also the NEAT coordination element until the 31st of March 2023. So we've got another year's worth of funding, but beyond that, the picture is looking quite uncertain. To give you an idea, that the European funding, what it currently supports is vulnerability profiling of young people who are at high risk of becoming NEET, and that's done by the NEET coordination team. And they work in schools. They hold monthly panels in each of our secondary schools and with the PRU and special tuition to discuss support and the needs of the young people who've been highlighted as at risk of becoming NEET. So the European funds that aspect of it, but the European funding also funds the local authorities' main source of support for those particular young people that are highlighted at pre-16, and that's through the Inspire to Achieve project, which is a support project. It provides one-to-one support, it provides group activities, and it also provides level 1 qualifications. I know Andrea referred earlier on to the fact that all of our young people, all our young people leave school with a qualification. Well, this project actually contributes to that. It also provides funding for that key transition point at year 11, where young people leave school, leave the compulsory education and make a transition into a post-16 opportunity. And that's where the Inspire to Work project comes in as well. And the Inspire to Work is post-16, and that works with probably the young people who are furthest away from the employment market at that point. But I need to point out that the Inspire to Work is one of a number of post-16 employment projects, like Communities for Work Plus, for example. And all of that work is achieved through partnership working. Everything, we work in partnership with schools, we work in partnership with Careers Wales, with the college, with work-based learning providers, with social services, etc. Okay, so this funding is not just for support, it's for the whole infrastructure around the NEET-related work that the local authority under the Youth Engagement and Progression Framework is expected to carry out. Just to give you a flavour, I mean, the work has been successful. For example, even though the NEET figure last year did go up compared to previous years, we were able to track and identify any young person that left school without a post-16 destination and quickly put support in place for them. So we had no young people leaving school that were unknown to us. We knew where all of them were, even if they were actually NEET at that point. So a lot of this work has become quite embedded in the schools. They rely on our staff to provide information and to provide support. Other key successes, though I think is worth noting, is around 90% of our most vulnerable young people do make that successful transition. And I'm talking here about young people who attend the PRU, young people who are on special tuition, and young people in our secondary schools who've been identified as needing support. And any young people that don't make that successful transition are picked up at post-16 as well through the work that the NEETs team do. And perhaps I know I shouldn't, because the report's not coming out until tomorrow, but it was highlighted as an area of good practice by Estim in the recent inspection. And obviously, we are very concerned that in a year's time, the impact of a loss of this funding is going to be quite significant. For example, I think the local authority would struggle to meet its obligations under the Youth Engagement and Progression Framework. the support structure for young people and the identification structure for young people at pre-16 will not be there anymore. And obviously, a lot of this work links into the RAS strategy, particularly around the goals around supporting learners' health and well-being and supporting the improvement of achievement and progression, for example. And obviously, all the partnership working that is built up over a significant number of years would also be lost. So really, I think the reason we wanted to bring this to your attention is so that you are aware of the risks associated with this loss of funding. Now, there is talk about the Shared Prosperity Fund being the replacement, although I have to say at this particular point in time, what will be eligible for Shared Prosperity funding is not clear, particularly at pre-16. I've seen some guidance, some outline guidance, which really looks as if it's talking more at a post-16 level. And Welsh Government are not really giving us any further information on what they could do to step in if Shared Prosperity was not available for us to look at. And of course, the other thing about Shared Prosperity funding is the local authority could have an allocation, but there'd be lots of other things that would be competing for that funding as well. I think really that's giving you an overview of the paper and the flavour of what we're trying to convey here. So I think I leave it at that point and hand over to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Samantha, for that. And I know that both you and Chris have put one heck of a lot of work into this subject matter. I can remember Chris informing us of the problems, well, if not 2 or 3 years ago. And the problems, as I see it, are still there, and they are picked up within your report. And I don't think members need to go further than your report. To me, it's an excellent brief report, because it really lays it down as far as this authority is concerned. And of course, it lays it down as far as the Welsh Government and the National Government are concerned. I was more than impressed by paragraph 5.7, when it flags up, and I'll just read it: the loss of ESF funded programmes with no future plan for sustaining current resources will limit the future impact the Council has on the priorities set out in A, the focus on the future, and then perhaps to me more importantly, the raising aspirations and raising standards strategy. If the funding's not there, they're going to fall flat. And we have made a commitment in November 2020 via the RAS strategy that we would do all in our power to give students of this and young people of this county borough the best possible chances in life as far as education is concerned. And then if you go down to, and this is my final observation, however, it is recognised across education that more needs to be done, more needs to be achieved to prevent young people in years 7, 8 and 9 from disengaging. Through extending this support, therefore requiring additional investment, not additional money, additional investment, because as a council, we have on numerous occasions talked about investing in our young people within Merthyr Tydfil. And it's also an investment to support the ambitions of the raising aspirations and raising standards strategy. So we cannot move away from this. This is with us to be resolved, and as I said earlier, I'm finishing in May, but I'll be keeping my eye on this to make sure that the council is going in the right direction and basically finding the resources that's required to keep everything intact within this report. So with that, I'll open it up to members. I've got Lee Davis that wants to come in, and then I got Sherelle. So Lee first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Sam. We discussed this in Regen in depth, like I said, on the last scrutiny. It's really worrying. You know, like you said, everything will have an impact on the education and in terms with Deb's team and employability, and you know, it's just going to go on. And the worrying thing is we don't know where we are with levelling up shared prosperity. We've got the CRF at the moment, which is really exciting in terms of education within schools over the next few months. But that's just, you know, that's a quick turnaround. You know, it's only a 6-month project. Hopefully the project will have some serious impacts and in a short term, and you know, we can show there's a need for extended funding. But like my question is in terms of if we had to put, you know, how much would it cost us to replace like for like? Would you know that? And yeah.
Roughly about £625,000. It supports 18 staff, and that's including NEAT coordination, Inspire to Achieve and Inspire to Work staff. That's roughly how much it would cost.
And obviously those staff, that there could be redundancies within those 18 staff as well.
Yes, we've calculated the cost of making the staff redundant would be around £98,000, not all of which could come out of European funding. You know, so the local authority would have to bear that cost.
Okay.
And can I just point out, though, Lee, I think in the paper that was submitted on the 25th to the other scrutiny committee, the ballpark figure there did include our staff as well. All right, so this isn't in addition to what was in that paper. It's just that in this particular paper, we just highlighted our own staff.
Yeah, because I think off the top of my head, it was
240, 250,000, I think perhaps was the figure that was quoted in that paper.
Yeah. And you know, there was around about 100 jobs as well within.
Yes, I think it was 117 staff.
Yeah. It's really, really worrying.
It is, and the thing is, Lee, that these are staff that have worked for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, they're experienced, they're knowledgeable, they're embedded in our schools, for example. And I think that came across quite strongly during the inspection of how embedded they are in the schools and how much the schools rely on these staff to provide support to the young people, plus qualifications, you know, plus other sort of small group activities that work around young people's well-being, mental health, you know, so they do provide a good package of support.
Yeah, and you know, like you said, they've been with us a long time, and then some of these staff have moved around different sectors, and they transferred their skills, so they've got not just a knowledge on that, you know, on where they're working now, but maybe all other departments within the local authority. So the loss of knowledge is going to be, you know,
huge.
really, yeah, huge, as you say.
Yes.
Okay, I guess now is the time we need to be discussing how we're going to approach this, you know, especially with the uncertainty. So discussions in terms of, well, Lisa and the cabinet and the next administration need to be having over the next 6 months or more, I guess.
I would say so. I mean, there is talk of more information coming out about shared prosperity within the next couple of months, and possibly a very quick turnaround for any business plans to be submitted. But as I said before, it isn't really clear what's going to be eligible for that funding or how much the allocation would be. It's my understanding, you know, that the allocation would be based on the size of the local authority, but please don't take my word for that. You know, I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, as I said to you before, there's lots of projects that are European funded, not just this one, you know, so whether the amount that the local authority would have would cover everything, I couldn't tell you at this point. But I think my biggest fear is that the pre-16 work and that key transition work into post-16, which is where we are really effective, may not be eligible, and that's my biggest concern. And when I'd asked Welsh Government, I'm sorry, but Welsh Government are just not really given us assurances that they would cover anything off that wasn't eligible, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, and well, you know, UK government are holding the cards here, and
yes, absolutely, they are. Yes,
you know, in terms of the shared prosperity and the levelling up and the CRF. You know, I know you said in terms of the next 2 months, in terms of, you know, hopefully we'll know, but you know, the CRF one, I submitted that application June last year, and they didn't, and we were supposed to know at the end of July, and they didn't tell us till November.
yeah.
So, and you know, and then that's been months and months going on, just going back and forth, what's eligible and stuff. So, you know, they may say next 2 months, but then, you know, we might be closer to Christmas or next year before
Yes.
they come across. Okay, thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Lee. Cheryl?
Thanks, Sam, and thanks for the report. And I echo everything that Lee has just said, really. The work that you've done as a local authority over the last 5-6 years around the NEETs agenda has been, you know, significant, and we, you know, it has started to work for our children and young people. And I just think, you know, the loss of this ESF funding and the European funding collectively is again going to hit our most vulnerable members of the community. Do you know what I mean? And it's, you know, it is something that's really frustrating. I appreciate that there's constraints from UK government and Welsh government, but you know, this has been a long time coming. So I do share your frustrations that we haven't got a plan in place yet in terms of what local authorities can access to backfill really for all the European projects in Merthyr. So when you just talking about, I was going to ask some questions about staffing and things like that. So you've just answered those in Lee's questions anyway. But for the local authority, it equated to 18 members of staff. And you briefly mentioned at the beginning, some of those staff have been now extended to March 2023. So for the majority of those 18 staff, when will their contracts end as it is currently, Sam?
They've all been extended, Cheryl. We've managed. There were some underspends in European funding that the regional team in Blaenau Gwent have redistributed. So we have, in fact, got enough funding to sustain everything until the 31st of March 2023. But I think it's important to note as well that Families First funding does fund some of the NEET coordination aspect of the work, so it's joint funded there. And following the review of Families First, we have got funding for another year. It's about £35,000 to maintain that NEET coordination aspect. But no, I can confirm that all the staff, nobody's been made redundant. Everybody's had their contracts renewed for a further year.
Fab. Okay. Well, that's a bit of good news then. So, has the local authority done an impact assessment on the loss of the European funding across the whole county borough, not just for the local authority? Because I'm aware that post 16 the college have had huge investment through ESF funding for, and again, for the most vulnerable young people that, you know, are at risk of falling out of college or need additional support, you know, under the care of social services or, you know, mental health and well-being. So do we know the whole scale of the impact that ESF funding loss will have on us as a county borough? Yes,
Yes. Deb Ryan and Chris Long submitted that paper on the 25th of January to the sorry, I can't remember the name of the scrutiny committee, but that covered everything. So ours was in there, but I mean, it was so embedded, but that's why we thought we needed to bring this paper to everybody's attention, because it was embedded in this huge general paper on the loss of European funding and the impact, and it did include some external organisations that also received funding. Now, I mean, the college is part of the Inspire programme, is part of Inspire to Achieve, you know, so they are a regional, one of the regional partners for that project, and yes, they use that funding to support our vulnerable learners. Well, and as we know, most of our young people go to the college. Yeah. And that's where most of our young people go to at post-16. So yes, it'll be a great loss to the colleges as well. Yeah, definitely. Okay, thanks for the information, Sam, and I'm sure us, you know, we'll do everything we can to make sure that this is a priority moving forward as well. So yeah, thank you for that. Thank you, Cheryl, that would be great.
Any other questions? No? Okay, Samantha, thank you very much for going through that report with us. I think it's posed a few questions which obviously after May now will have to be addressed by the authority. And in a way, I'm glad that Lisa is here. Lisa Mitten, because obviously she can see where we are going if we're not careful as far as the RAS strategy is concerned, and that is my main concern. Okay, thank you very much for that. On to the next item, which is the forward work programme for 21-22. This is a programme that we look at every month. It is my suggestion, and only a suggestion, that we don't consider placing anything in addition to what is already there at this point in time, because this is the last scrutiny committee now for learning until the 9th of May, and that is cancelled due to the elections. So there's a date then to be confirmed for the next scrutiny committee. So my suggestion is that we leave consideration of additional items because we don't know how the scrutiny committee is going to be made up. Okay, in terms of the membership, but that is only my suggestion.
Makes sense, Chair. I would second that.
Okay. Thank you very much. All in agreement there?
Yes, Chair, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. On to item 7, scrutiny referrals.
No referrals received, Chair.
I
No.
got no knowledge of any referrals being made. Reflection and devaluation of the meeting. Well, I think a whole hatful of important questions were put this afternoon, and I think we also posed some questions which will have to be picked up now in order for the new scrutiny committee and the new authority, new administration, whenever that takes place. Okay. Any other business? I've got no other business to bring up, only to thank each and every one of you for your constant support throughout the time that I've been chairing this committee. I've enjoyed every bit of it because it is close to my heart and always will be, because it's to do with education. And that's why I was so passionate talking about the RAS strategy, which I know Sue played a major part in before it came to the scrutiny committee for us to sign off. So I know that Sue wants to run with this document. It's a 5-year program, which hopefully will ensure that our children, our young people are coming out of school with having had the best education possible. And that takes us back to the subject matter we just talked about, and it takes us on to the new administration and whether they are going to have the same commitment as Sue has got towards the RAS strategy. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much for your efforts, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Chair,
you.
and enjoy your
All the best,
retirement.
Harvey.
All the best to
Enjoy
you
your
all.
retirement.